Hey everyone, welcome. Thanks for joining us today for deepfake detection and identity verification, safeguarding businesses in the AI era. That is a mouthful of a title, but I promise that we're going to deliver. I'm Sean Cordner. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer and bloated webinar title writer here at Amplix. We're excited to dig into this topic that's growing more urgent by the day, how businesses can protect themselves from increasingly sophisticated AI-driven threats. We have a great panel today. They're going to break down what's happening on the front lines, share some real world strategies, and answer any questions that you may have at the end. To get us started, I'm going to introduce our experts. We have Paul, if I don't get this right, I apologize. Paul Volusamy.
You're good. Yep.
Good. Okay. Is the co-founder and CEO of VerifiNow, an omni-channel identity verification platform built to combat synthetic identities, deepfakes, and AI-driven fraud. He works with enterprises in healthcare, finance, and education to secure onboarding, protect contact centers, and modernize identity assurance. VerifiNow helps organizations verify not just who someone says they are, but who they truly are across any channel in real time. Also joining us is Scott Weiner. He's the AI lead at Neueon, where he serves as both AI researcher and fractional CTO, helping organizations adopt AI responsibly and drive measurable business outcomes. With over 30 years of executive leadership in tech, Scott advises multi-billion-dollar enterprises across finance, healthcare, and ed tech. He blends deep technical expertise with strategic insight to guide AI transformation and policy, contributing to national conversations on governance and regulation through his work with trade groups and congressional stakeholders. All right, now that we got that out of the way, let's have a little bit of fun. Paul, just to get started here, let's set up the challenge for everyone. I think it's safe to say that we're in a data economy. Personally identifiable information is the currency of that economy. How would you describe the current landscape around PII? What does it mean for enterprises that are collecting and also tasked with protecting that data?
Oh, absolutely, Sean. So the landscape around personally identifiable information, or PII, because that's a mouthful, has never been more complex or more fragile, right? So today, enterprises are collecting and storing massive volumes of sensitive information. That's everything from not just your name and date of birth, but social security numbers, health records, financial records, your college transcripts, you name it, they have it, right? But it's also the backbone of their operation, so they need it. But what that does is it makes a prime target for the bad actors. So it's estimated that in 2024 globally, around 1.7 billion individuals had their information compromised by data breaches. Now, that's 1 in 5 people on the planet, right? So every time there's a new data breach, the stolen data becomes fuel for synthetic identity fraud, deepfake impersonations, and account takeovers. So for an enterprise, they collect the information because they need it, whether it's for compliance, service delivery, personalization, onboarding, whatever, for so many reasons. But they also have this responsibility to have to protect that information. And it's becoming harder and harder, a lot because of AI and what we're going to be talking about today. That threat environment has outpaced traditional defenses. So it isn't about, enterprises need to rethink identity and data protection, not just as an IT issue, but more around trust-centered initiatives.
What are the more common threat vectors that bad actors are using to target this information?
So it's the top of the list is still social engineering, right? That's still their go-to method or attack vector for the bad actors, and it's evolved. It's evolved with generative AI. Fraudsters can now create like these hyper personalized emails, text messages, live phone calls, and manipulate not just a contact center agent into gaining access to an account, but an enterprise help desk to gain access to the enterprise environment. Then you have synthetic IDs. These are fraudsters combining stolen and fabricated PII to create new believable identities that can pass through onboarding, credit checks, and even some biometric systems, right? So they use these identities for applying for a loan, applying for college admissions, not really to get an education, but to use that to go in and get fraudulently gain financial aid and some of those things, right? And then deep fakes and voice cloning, right? We're starting to see a lot more of deep fakes, whether it's video or voice, and calling in or taking advantage of programs within healthcare, calling in, signing up for telehealth programs, and all of that, right? So those I would say are the top three attack vectors. I mean, there's so much more, whether credential stuffing, account takeovers, but I'd say social engineering, synthetic IDs, and of course, deep fakes are the top of the list.
And how is AI generated, voice and video deep fakes? How is that accelerating, the social engineering in particular as a threat vector?
It's making it faster. It's making it more reliable. I mean, more. I wouldn't say more reliable, more realistic, right? So, and it's so easily accessible, right? I mean, you have off-the-shelf solutions that you could be an amateur. You don't have to be a seasoned bad actor to create these synthetic IDs or voice clones. You have off-the-shelf solutions that can generate clone voices and videos in a matter of minutes and that don't cost you a whole lot.
Yeah. I would say also, we talked about this when we prepped for this webinar a little bit, but there's a human cognitive bias that we've evolved to have called default to trust. And what that basically means is, human beings, we assume that people aren't trying to get over on us. That's where the word con man comes from, right? It's confidence man, right? It's you build confidence. It's easy to win someone's confidence. Um, and also, if I can pull out my amateur evolutionary psychologist card real quick. Our brains are predictive modeling machines, right? So if we are predicting the future, what's going to happen based off of previous experiences. And so with social engineering, um, people are not used to deepfakes being introduced into this kind of environment. So it's going to be a lot easier to get past their defenses. Would you agree?
Absolutely, because hey, even if you look at how would be until now, we've been programmed to look out for spam and phishing and fraud by looking for typos. Is it coming from a Nigerian prince? That's what we're looking for. Even when you look at trainings that you have, security trainings that whether it's Gov or Educate, anywhere, right, at an organization, how do you look for identifying phishing attacks? We still haven't documented how do we look for deep fake attacks, right? And you mentioned the human element. We're always programmed to trust folks. When you call customer service, they are there to help you, and they're gonna make sure you get the support you need, the help you need. A bad actor, all they have to do is put a screaming baby in the background. I mean, just play an audio clip of a screaming baby, and they're going to help you. They're going to be like, hey, don't worry about the baby. I got you. That's what they're going to do. And being able to take advantage of that human element is what they prey on. And spoof voices and synthetic IDs and generative AI, all of these combined together are just, a bad recipe for fraud.
It's definitely a dynamically changing landscape, and AI is absolutely accelerating the risks. Scott, I want to talk to you real quick. This does sound a little bit like science fiction. Is the technology really there to fool the gatekeepers of this PII?
It's pretty good now, especially in high pressure or routine activities.
How prevalent would you say it is? I mean, are we talking about only huge criminal enterprises or state-sponsored bad actors that have the capability to generate these kind of deep fakes that are good enough to fool people?
No, it's widespread. The tools are cheap and easy to use by anyone.
Yeah. I'm still a little dubious that that this kind of technology is out there and that accessible. Do you have any way to kind of validate this or prove this to us?
Well, maybe you were just talking to one. That's kind of the reality of this is that it's getting very easy.
We lost your volume, Scott. While we wait for Scott to come back online real quick, I don't know that we fooled anyone with this. I don't know if we fooled anyone with this, but I do hope people can be convinced, um, that this technology actually is out there and is a threat and is accessible. When Scott comes back online here, I'm going to ask him, are you there, Scott? Do we lose him completely? Lost him completely. Well, anyway, if you didn't notice, that was deepfake Scott. We're calling him Evil Scott, and Scott took some um, over the counter, off the shelf AI tools that cost about $20 to have access to. It was only a few hours of training the model, and he was able to build that evil version of himself, that AI version of himself. And I think that shows that this really is accessible. And remember, it doesn't have to be perfect. I mean, I think you've talked about this before, Paul, but the bad actors only have to have success one time. The enterprise
Yep.
has to stop every single potential threat.
Every single one. Every
Yeah.
single one.
You guys able to hear me?
Yeah, you're back.
Okay.
Scott, talk to us a little bit about Evil Scott. How were you able to, build that model? What went into it?
Yeah, it's surprisingly easy. That was about $30 to a service, $30 a month. And I simply spoke for about 2 minutes while they recorded my video. And they created this clone. It took about 6 hours, I think, to train the actual clone. And then I get an email that says your clone is done. And now I can use them as much as I want. I think for this purpose, it's great to kind of make the point. It's getting much better. There are more sophisticated models that are even more powerful, but this one, you do not need to know anything about technology to create what I just did.
Yeah, and you intentionally went with the more accessible, less complicated
Yeah.
model, just to kind of prove the point that even something like that is good enough in a lot of cases to penetrate the defenses.
Yeah. And even if I wouldn't use it to, let's say, have a whole conversation with you online or whatever, it's going to keep getting better. But you can notice that I could sit on someone else's call
Mhm.
and probably not be noticed. And, I'm using my own face. I could be using someone else's.
Sure. And someone else's voice. I mean,
Yep.
in the social media age, everyone has pictures and videos and recordings of themselves all over. So it'd be very easy to train a model based off of publicly available information. Would you agree?
Oh, yes.
So you could be sitting in that call, on that confidential financial call, talking about listening in on everything that you shouldn't be.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so Scott, just kind of talk to us a little bit more about, what is the landscape of AI generated technology?
Yeah, AI generated technology today is both more powerful and more accessible than ever before. That's kind of the point we're making. It's reshaping the industry and frankly, daily life. AI generated voice and video tools are now widely accessible. If anyone's seen like the newest ones from like Google, it's incredible that they're now syncing video and voice in a way that is harder and harder to tell from real life. So while some platforms will claim they have safeguards, like requiring proof of consent or watermarks, they're often easily bypassed or simply not enforced. There's a lot of open source models that don't have any of those security guards. And the reality is the technology is outpacing these safeguards, and bad actors are quick to exploit any gaps.
And what would you say all this means, for the potential of AI to circumvent traditional security measures?
Yeah. It, it, It highlights a fundamental shift we're having. So traditionally, security measures like knowledge-based authentication or static biometrics they're now becoming increasingly vulnerable. AI can convincingly mimic a voice or a face, even behaviors. It makes it much harder to rely on any single factor for authentication. It means that businesses need to start rethinking their security stack and think of it as layers of multiple forms of verification and invest in continuous monitoring for suspicious activity.
Paul, let's talk about what sectors are at most risk for this kind of attack.
So you've got, the financial services, Healthcare, they're always the target. There's a lot of sensitive information that's collected and stored for the services that they provide. Um, what we're seeing is the contact centers, especially, they're an easy attack vector, and it's not just exposing them to account takeovers, but just from an operational perspective. When an AI call comes in, they're able to get past those IVRs, right? Those automated systems, answer all those questions, get to a contact center agent. That's eating up minutes. It's costing these organizations millions of dollars a month, especially the larger ones that have high volumes of calls. And beyond that, they're advanced enough where they're able to engage with a live individual. And again, the intent there is an account takeover, right? So, and fraudulent loan applications, fraudulent account openings, all of that stuff is, right now, knowledge-based authentication, just an ID verification for even KYC. So financial services have always been a target. Same with healthcare, especially telehealth. I mean, we've all had a telehealth appointment by now. And when you join that call, at least in my case and most of the folks that I've spoken to, the verification by the doctor is just asking for a name and a date of birth, right? I mean, that's not information that's just there, easily available, just even on social media. But so again, adding in a fake Scott, AI generated into image, video, voice, and everything else. So healthcare. We're also starting to see a huge problem in higher education using synthetic IDs, AI generated transcripts, applying for a college admission. And that's not the problem, getting admission to the college. It's using that admission to apply for financial aid, Pell Grants, which they get and they're gone. So, and of course, AI, shopping, retail, everything else. But where we're seeing the biggest problems are healthcare, finance, education, higher education, and platforms. Everybody's with retail, for example, right? You've got agentic AI, which is making the shopping experience a lot easier. But in the process, you've got AI agents that can price shop, place the order, have it shipped to your address. With those AI capabilities, if you go in and pair that in with a synthetic ID, deep fake voice and clones, now you've got an automated fraud machine that's working 24/7, right? Applying for loans, applying for healthcare, joining telehealth calls and getting prescriptions, right? So
it's the AI is enabling the volume, and it's also increasing the sophistication of these
yes,
attacks. And not only that, it's targeting, like we've said before, what is ultimately the weakest point in anyone's defenses, any corporation's defenses, and that's the human being.
absolutely.
One interesting thing you might want to we can put this in the notes actually. OpenAI just released a document on the malicious acts they're thwarting, and it's fascinating to see the types of things they're finding people are doing with it. And a lot of what we're talking about is obviously in there, but there are others. What you have to think about is things like state actors that are doing things like creating fake identities so that people can get jobs and then use that just for the sole purpose of stealing data. That's one example. So it's really a big deal, and the layered approach to this is what we have to focus on.
Yeah, one of the attendees was anonymous, so I don't know who, but they left a note saying fraudulent new hires are getting onboarded, receiving
Yep.
equipment with logins.
Yeah.
Yep.
By the way, North Korea is doing this in huge numbers, apparently.
Yeah. But it doesn't even have to be a state.
It does not.
Actor, right?
It does not.
Yeah. So, Scott, are there any emerging technologies or protocols that can help authenticate human versus AI interactions?
Yes, and this is an area of rapid innovation. So behavioral metrics like how someone types or moves a mouse or interacts with a device, it's much harder for AI to fix that. So that's still working for us. Liveness detection is also improving, requiring users to perform actions that are difficult for deepfake to replicate in real time. Multi-factor authentication obviously still is an issue, helpful. It combines something you know, something you have, and something you are, and that's becoming more standard. And on top of that, AI-driven anomaly detection systems can flag unusual patterns that suggest synthetic activity. Of course, this is an arms race, so AI is going to keep getting better at those things, so we have to keep working on the other side of that as well.
Yeah, the future is AI fighting AI, right?
Yeah.
Paul, Scott had mentioned liveness detection, and I know that that's VerifiNow's sweet
Yep.
spot. You guys are leaders in that space. Can you talk to us a little bit about what strategies organizations can implement to, detect and prevent some of this?
Right, and absolutely right. So liveness detection is to ensure that the individual who's attempting to complete a transaction is who they claim to be and are really present. Right. So we've got the ID verification, which we know can be spoofed, whether it's with synthetic IDs or a combination of everything else. But liveness proves that the individual is really there, and layer that in with ID verification, then it matches up that they are who they claim to be and they're really there. And you need both voice and facial biometrics, both because again, you're cloning not just the voice, but the individual themselves. So, but more importantly, this needs to be deployed in an omni-channel way, right? Because a customer journey or an individual's journey isn't just contacting customer service. It could be an online transaction. You could go in person to open a bank account, switch to your mobile app to start your first complete a transaction, or reset a password on your go to your computer and reset your password, or call customer service. So at every one of those points, you need to be able to verify that that individual is really there. So using liveness detection in real time is critical, right? So of course that's our secret sauce is ID verification, KYC, which a lot of folks do, layering in real time liveness detection at every engagement point.
And I know Scott's going to have something to say about this as well, but I want to start with you. Aside from technology, are there any policy or process aspects to, building defenses against this kind of attack? Paul.
Oh, that was for me?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Policy or process, what are the other aspects of this aside from the technology?
I think, part of it is also, adopting, real-time liveness, real-time tools. Scott mentioned static, KBA, and multi-factor authentications. They're all good, but you do need more than just that, right? So, but one of the bigger pieces is like we talked about earlier, right? It's the human element, being able to train not just your employees, your contact center agents, or your customer service folks to not trust anyone. I mean, that's a huge shift from how we are programmed to be, as in trusting everyone, and having them say, trust no one until they prove that they are alive and they are who they claim to be. Another important piece that the enterprises need to adopt is educating their customers on how to detect spoofed and deep fake attacks. I mean, like we said, we've talked about how these are running 24/7. They're hyper real. And it's not just one attack. They're not just going to send you an email. They're going to send you a text message. Hey, how you doing? It's been a long time. And then they're going to send you a WhatsApp message. You're going to, at some point, you're going to realize, hey, I probably know this person. I just don't remember them. Yeah. Right. And then they're going to hit you up with, hey, my car broke down. I need some money. Can you send me the money? Right. So it's educating their customers, the general public, to be aware of identifying these frauds, because it's no longer the Nigerian prince who's asking for money. I mean, one of the other examples is, and we've all heard about, is this a cloned voice of a CEO calling into the finance department saying, hey, I'm on travel, I'm in a bind, can you wire this money? When the CEO of the company calls, you're going to act on it. And if it sounds like him, you're going to think it's him, right? So being aware, again, not trusting anything or anyone unless they actually prove it's them.
Amplix, we're growing through acquisition in addition to organically. And we've seen this every time we make an acquisition. New employees from the company that we acquired get targeted by these kind of attacks. It's always a text message from the CEO. Hey, this is Dan Gill. I need you to buy all these gift cards real quick, or I need you to authorize this wire transfer. And a wary person won't fall for something like that, and they don't. And we now educate people on that. But if that were a phone call, or if it were a Zoom call, that might
Yep.
be a little bit different, right? And that's what
Yep.
this technology is allowing to happen. Scott, you are an advocate in AI in general, not just for this particular threat vector
Yeah.
of awareness in education and governance. So just maybe talk a little bit more about the role of that here. And then I'll specifically prompt you. Someone just asked, Brianne Wood asked, what about the use of safe words or certain actions to help determine if it was a deep fake, which is a great question.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if we mentioned that already, but yeah. So a couple of things to think about here. One is you really, Paul was talking about kind of generically, we need to trust people less, which sounds awful, but from a security perspective, we do. But I think that we can do this in layers. Like there are certain things that are more important than others. So if I'm telling you where I'm going to lunch today, maybe I don't need to have a secret password for that. But anything that's an important decision or requires sensitive information, you do need to almost treat your human interactions like you would a computer interaction. So the equivalent of it. So a password would not be a bad idea to have some kind of, the thing is that password ever written down anywhere? Because if it is, there's no telling if an AI is just going to find out about it anyway. So
Yeah.
you do have to be very careful about this stuff. So some of the things we have to think about is, you know, there are regulatory and legal frameworks, which we can talk about later. And then under that, there's just the transparency and accountability you put in place in your company. When I go into an organization, the first thing we ask about is, do you have an acceptable use policy in place, period, regardless of whether they're talking about AI or not, an AUP. And oftentimes they do not. And so we start there because the first thing is to just set expectations for the company in policy. Then we can get into enforcement, it's a whole other issue. But once you have policy in place for how we think about and interact with these things, that can help drive a lot of the other conversations. But you have to make sure that as part of that policy, you're explaining to people the why this matters, what the implications are, what can go wrong. Help them feel more accountable to those policies. Otherwise, they're just words. The second thing is that what we're finding more and more is that collaboration and information sharing, ironically, fostering partnerships among tech companies and regulators and society in general is going to become more and more important. We're going to have open conversations about these things, about what's happening. You know, one example is, with HIPAA, with the Healthcare Information Privacy Portability Act. We're all kind of familiar with that because we deal with it whenever we go to the doctor. Well, they have a regulation in there that says that you have to, basically disclose within 60 days of something going wrong, some threat happening, becoming real. Well, 60 days in AI speak is a lifetime. It's thousands of lifetimes. It's millions of lifetimes of generational changes that are going on. So we don't have necessarily a regulatory framework yet that really supports the things we need to do as best practices in our own company. So we need to be better than that. So we need to think about things in much smaller time frames when it comes to AI risk and actual events occurring. Training and awareness, can't stress that enough. There has to be training and awareness around these types of risks. People do not understand how extensive this problem is. So, because think of it this way, it's not that AI has created new threats per se, it's able to do them better and quicker. So, for example, I could come at you through something like, a fake Zoom call, which is pretty intimidating when you think about your boss saying, "Hey, I need some credit cards right now." But I could also, at the same time, create an entire website, news articles, social media profiles, all in minutes. I can get this stuff spun up, and it's going to look real. And by the way, I can pull in your real data so that it really applies to you and catches you off guard. So I don't care how good you are at this, you can be tripped up if you're relying just on your own senses. Um, Good security, communication, and verification procedures, crisis management, recovery, obviously. But at the end of the day, this is going to come down to a layered approach. There's really no other solution.
You mentioned education and training, and I just want to add that it should be ongoing education and training,
Good
right?
point.
This is something that evolves so quickly, but not only that, there's that old saying, we don't rise to our potential, we fall to our level of training, right? So when someone is feeling pressured, because that's what they do, right? That's one of their main tools is make you feel pressure one way or another. If you're feeling that kind of pressure, you may not be thinking, but if you are trained and you have repeated exposure to these kind of things, it's more likely that you're going to be able to recognize the pattern.
We already do phishing attacks within organizations where we, put out fake emails to see if who clicks on them, things like that. This is just the next level.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Paul, just looking ahead, how do you foresee AI technology evolving, and how's that going to change the threat vectors that we talked about, or what new threats might come from this?
Right. And it's not just how the attacks are executed, right? It's more about how they're commercialized and scaled. I mean, we've talked about how accessible all these tools are. So it's almost like fraud as a service, right? Being able to just get off the shelf solutions, pair them, go into the dark web and buy those synthetic IDs from the data breaches, layer them in with the deep fakes through the AI tool. So it's just getting faster and faster, and it's an arms race, as Scott's mentioned. Another thing is going to be a cross-channel convergence of fraud, right? More like blended attacks where they're going to start with a voice or a video or a chat. I mean, they are going to be engaging with us in such a realistic manner. They're going to be part of our daily workflows that almost undetected, right? And that's where the whole education component, we're going to have to constantly stay ahead of what to look for. It's not just typos and bad grammar. It's, hey, there was a delay in the voice. Hey, he came on camera for 5 seconds and went away. Sounds like him, but he's not joining. I mean, we've all been on those calls where an individual joins the call on video and says, hey, I don't want to suck up everybody's bandwidth, so I'm going to go off, right? That 2 seconds on that video could have been evil Scott, right? So again, there's so much that's happening, and so we're going to see a lot more of liveness detection coming into play, in detecting some of these fraudulent attacks, right? But I think there's also going to be a lot more that's going to come. We're going to have to find other ways to stay ahead. There are a few organizations that are looking at decentralized IDs with zero trust. That's something that we're working on, especially for healthcare. So there's going to be new solutions, new ways to attack it. But again, it's that arms race, and we have to stay ahead because these guys are working 24/7, and AI's made it a lot easier and affordable for them to do it.
Hey,
Yes.
Sean, I have great news. I just literally now got a text from Eliza saying that I can become a data optimization assistant, make $600 a day. I just have to click here.
Congratulations, man.
It just came in.
Yeah. Um, Scott, I wanted to ask you, Paul had mentioned decentralized IDs as an example of how we might combat something like this in the future. And I presume that that's something that will be built on blockchain. Does blockchain have promise in, fighting against this authentication issue that we have?
I suppose it does. I honestly don't know enough about where that is at the moment. I think the way to look at it is that we're going to have to keep adding layers, is what I keep being redundant here. And I think blockchain is a good vector for part of the solution. But it's less about the mechanism for storing it, and the more is how are we going to trust it? What levels of trust are we going to have in there? It's going to keep evolving. Look, the problem we really have right now is the next wave of threats are going to involve multimodal attacks. So you're going to have voice, video, text. It's just going to keep getting more convincing, and I really think the human element of it is not going to go away. I joke about this, but my worst clients are healthcare when it comes to this. I love my healthcare clients, but the problem is that they are trained to be friendly and trusting. Customer service in general has this problem, and again, I'm characterizing what I think is a wonderful trait as a problem because we're dealing with trust issues for security. they naturally are inclined to trust. And in fact, it's going to be hard for them to do their jobs if they can't trust. So it's gonna be a constant challenge, and that's why I really advocate for open communication and lots of, as you said, Sean, iterative training, and just continue to raise the bar because this is going to continue to be a problem.
And because this is such a massive problem, there's, obviously a role that regulation has to play here. So, Scott, you're down in DC right now. I believe you're meeting with um, Congress or congressional aides at least, and kind of consulting with them on AI matters. So can you just kind of paint the picture for us of what is the regulatory climate right now when it comes to AI?
Yeah, the regulatory response to AI's ability to exploit personal information, particularly through deepfakes, is evolving pretty rapidly. And frankly, it's creating both opportunities, I think, for some businesses and significant risks for businesses as well. So yeah, I'm on Capitol Hill tomorrow discussing related AI competition issues, but this PII protection challenge cuts across every sector. Deloitte predicts that generative AI, which powers deepfakes, could contribute to fraud losses around, I think, 40 billion in the United States by 2027. It's massive. The regulatory response is creating a patchwork, though, that both is inadequate and potentially harmful to innovation. And this is the balancing act. The core threat is exactly what we've described. Deepfakes being used to extract PII or existing PII being weaponized to create more convincing deepfakes, that can fool employees and customers. So what's happening right now is there's probably 700 or more state laws around AI and various aspects of AI and healthcare, the specific laws and so on. So each state has its own thing going. The House tried to put into a major bill a moratorium on state level laws and regulations around AI for 10 years, which I think is kind of overreach of trying to help the innovation side, because what ends up happening is then we have nothing because there's no federal framework yet. The Senate just this week changed it in their version of the bill, which to a little bit of a different requirement, which is basically if you put any state AI laws, you're going to lose some of your funding around some FCC broadband program called BEAD, and that's not necessarily the best way to do it either. So this is the debate going on, and something I'm going to be talking about tomorrow. So you may have also heard of the Takedown Act, which is requires platforms to take down deepfakes within 48 hours, but it doesn't address the fundamental problem of detection at scale. And meanwhile, I just read this today, but CrowdStrike is seeing a 400% increase in voice cloning attacks last year, and Microsoft says about 30%, 7% of businesses have already been hit with those types of deepfake attacks that we're talking about. And don't forget what we said before. So individual deepfake frauds are averaging like $450 to $600,000 in damages each. Now, this 48-hour requirement sounds reasonable until you realize that sophisticated AI generated content is often indistinguishable from authenticated materials. Even, well, unless you have enterprise grade detection tools, I suppose. But this is particularly concerning when you think about that mismatch we talked about with HIPAA. It's a 60-day personal health information exposure requirement versus a deepfake attack, which can cycle through multiple iterations in hours or not days. So this creates compliance challenges, which businesses are meeting, the letter of the law, but they're failing to address the actual threat. Here's some new news that I just started reading about this week, which is there's also growing anticipation now around AI.gov, which is expected to launch around July 4th. This is being positioned as a centralized hub for AI governance, and this could provide some of the needed coordination that we were hoping for in terms of offering regulatory mapping and compliance tools. But it also raises some questions about federal overreach or whether a centralized approach can really move fast enough to address, the threats that we're seeing.
Are
So
there any frameworks that people could adopt or follow that, kind of in the absence of regulation, that they could look to for guidance?
yeah, there's actually a lot coming out from various organizations. I think the NIST AI framework is probably the first one that people should be looking at. I know that that's also going to be part of AI.gov. They're going to be recommending that as well. There's several others, and if someone has questions about that, they can get in touch. I'd be happy to give them a whole list of ones to consider. What I would say, though, for most businesses, I think you're forced right now because of the patchwork across the country. And then we haven't even gotten into international. That's a whole other conversation we can get into if you want. But I think the thing you have to think about is that the ones that are the most strict right now in the US, as an example, are the CCPA, PRA, which is California's Consumer Privacy Rights Act, and also the Virginia Consumer Data Protection Act. Those are probably the two strictest right now. If I were building a small to medium-sized business, I would be focused on meeting their standards, because then you're kind of covered across the country, and it's getting you closer to the international things you need to deal with, let's say in the EU. So for business, this means implementing detection infrastructure for synthetic data, granular consent architectures for biometric data. This is where we talked about kind of having different layers for different purposes, having the ability to say, you can use my information for this purpose, but not that purpose, and also rapid response protocols. So, often without clear regulatory guidance on what constitutes adequate protection, this is all you can do is kind of put in these baseline risk mitigations.
I'm going to ask you both a final question. So in the meantime, if anyone has any questions, I've got a few questions and comments that we're going to address after that before we wrap up. But if anyone has any questions, get them in now while I ask this last question. So to both of you, I'll start with Paul. Let's give some actionable advice to the people that are watching. What would you say that they should do tomorrow in order to start protecting themselves?
I'd say, these threats are real. They're intelligent. They're automated. So I would say take and assess every engagement point, your weaknesses there. Start with the human element, right? See where obviously the customer service comes in. Look at your exposure through self-service, your password resets. Right now you might be sending a code to an MFA code or a 6-digit code to a phone. Is that strong enough? Can that be bypassed, right? So take inventory of your engagement points, and you have to look at it through the lens of automation and AI. We've heard enough about it. We see every day there's a platform's offering a new agentic AI experience, and look at it like, hey, can this agent bypass this step or this process? And look at it through that lens and say, hey, what can we do better? Right. And I think that's really where we have to look at, because at the end of the day, you need to move towards a multi-layered adaptive ID verification solution. And that goes beyond just verifying their identities, but also differentiating that. Are they a cloned individual or a fake ID?
We didn't really talk about that, but that is another potential risk here is, agentic AI, one AI fooling another AI somewhere in the chain here.
Well, if I may just add, right, we have a customer who's integrating us with their customer contact center solution, and their primary goal is to detect the cloned AI cloned voices, right? But they do want to add one exception because they have their own AI voice agent that will call in and speak to their agents or another AI voice agent. So two voice agents having conversations with each other, providing real results for them. So there are ways where there are instances where the cloned voices and AI is being used for better processes, but at the hands of the bad folks, it's danger.
What could possibly go wrong there?
Yeah, yeah.
Scott, how about you? Any actionable advice for the group?
Just a couple quick things. First, build detection capabilities now. Don't wait for regulatory clarity. It may or may not be coming, and you do need to protect your organization now and protect your customers as well, because they're at risk. Second thing is that I would audit your consent and authentication workflows right now. I wouldn't wait. If deepfakes can convince your employees to share PII or authorized financial transactions, your current verification process are not sufficient. So especially financial institutions need to think about this, but healthcare, anywhere that's regulated, really, anywhere that has personal information, really should be thinking about that. And the third one, which we did not cover a lot in this, but we're basically been talking about the bad actors on the outside. There's nothing that says this stuff can't be happening on the inside too. So you do need to realize that the people that are on the inside that have this capability know a lot more about your company already. and can take advantage of that in terms of the way they create a fraud. So there's a lot here to think about, but I would start with just looking at your current workflows and think of it this way. If you already have good security with your network, now just apply that to your human interactions and think about those interactions and how do you deal with that, especially since we have so many remote workers now. You know, Zoom has been a plus in a lot of ways for remote work. Zoom, I'm picking on Zoom because we're on Zoom, but all of them. But all of a sudden, that same remote tools that help us kind of communicate effectively also can fool us.
Yeah, great point and very scary point as well. I'm just going to get to some of the comments and questions that we have here, more comments and questions, but somebody said, you know, we're still so immature with this. Apps are bypassing QA to get to market way too fast, and we adopt half-baked solutions. And that's a really interesting point about, you know, kind of the integrity of your supply chain and the software that you're using, and how well they're protecting their platforms and you. Anyone want to speak to that?
Yeah, so one of the, I don't know how technical we want to get here, but one of the things that's happening right now is that you mentioned agentic technology, and so we're going to start having these agents that have some autonomy or agency and ability to solve things for us, and they're going to start talking to other agents. And the
Yep.
problem is that you look at something like MCP, which is the model context protocol that is becoming pretty widely adopted right now. It's a way for an agent to for an AI to look at an agent and ask it, what can you do for me? Well, and it's becoming very convenient for developers to connect to these services and see what services that MCP has. The problem is that you don't know what the quality of what they're doing is and then what's behind it. So like, I'll give you an example. I went to a credit union not that long ago and asked them, you know, do you use AI? And they said, no, so we don't really think we need an AI policy. Of course they do. They need an AI policy. And of course their people are using AI. I mean, they may not be using it to run their jobs every day, but they're using it. They're writing emails and everything else like we all are. They need an AI policy. But then I asked the second question, which is, do your vendors use AI? In other words, behind the applications and tools you're using, is there AI being used? And the answer was, well, yes. How many? It was many. It was like 40, 50 different companies they were able to list off. And this is a small credit union. And so then I asked, and what are their policies? And how are they protecting it? In other words, we have what's called the AI supply chain, and AI is actually becoming a much larger and broader chain, and every element along there could be a weak link. So you really need to understand that if you're in a highly regulated environment.
And this is how I believe the MGM Grand attack happened, right? And this was not an AI thing, but it was social engineering. And they attacked through an MSP that was providing help desk support.
Correct.
And so this is a perfect example of, you know, needing to validate the procedures for your third parties, right, Paul?
Yeah, that wasn't a brute force attack at all. I mean, it was basic knowledge-based authentication. I mean, that's what MGM's the MSP was using, and a bad actor was able to get that information from whether it's social media or wherever it was, call into the help desk and say, "Hey, I need access to this," and well, first name, last name, basic information that, you know, no real ID verification, right? So, and sure, okay, checks, everything checks, and the individual got access to the resources they needed to take MGM down for a few days, and I think they're still writing checks to for some of those lawsuits, but it's cost them over $100 million, bad press, and everything. So yes, so easy. And to add to, you know, organizations, you know, our applications being half baked, it's also, you don't want, it's the fear of missing out, right? It's folks are like, hey, we need to adopt this, we need to have this, we need to have an agentic AI app or whatever, right? And so they are rushing because from a competitive point of view, you know, their competitors are doing it, so they're like, hey, we need to get something else to go in, right? Or we go buy somebody to do that, right? So I think that arms race within competitors is also fueling a lot of half-baked solutions that are coming into the market and being adopted without any Q&A.
Sure. Had an interesting comment here. I'm just going to read it. I consult folks on SOPs, annual certification for employees, SSO, and regular audits of user profiles and access rights, daily reporting of what is being searched for internal training is imperative. Human in the loop needs to be a checkpoint on any AI generated info being shared as well.
Yes. Yes. Um, and unfortunately, I think you're going to find that even the human in the loop is becoming problematic. I'll give you an example. I was working with a healthcare organization that was trying to do professional coding. Basically, when they're on with the patient, they take notes, and those notes become a clinical note. And they're having the AI write the note, and then they're going over and reviewing the note to make sure it's correct. Well, what's happening is more and more they're trusting the note. So there's less and less oversight. And so human in the loop is more than just checking it. It's how are you checking the checker to make sure
Yep.
that they're continuing to do their job. And so we have a lot to work out still.
Next comment. I'm building my clone now to do my extra work as an agent with workflow and processes for admin, chat, and voice call. It's surreal. Um,
It
I,
is.
I wanted to read that one. It's fun and interesting how people are engaging with AI. But Scott, you've told me, personally how you're using AI in your world right now, and I thought it'd be fun if you just maybe riff on that for a second. Tell people, what you've built to be more productive.
Yeah, I people don't know this probably, but I look at different AI tools every single day. There's not a day that I'm not looking at new tools. And so I'm trying to figure out how they work, how good are they, what the risks are, and so on. And so part of that is I built out an AI lab in my office where I try out different things. One of the things I did is I built my own version of Jarvis, the AI from Iron Man. And so Jarvis can talk to me via different tech through Telegram and Slack in different ways and can interact with me. And I can answer questions and it can answer questions. And so um, one of the things I had to do is I created a sentiment analysis component to it so that when I get email, it could figure out, is this email a spam? Is it important? Is it something I need to respond to? And so on. And it would put it into tag it and put it in various boxes and so on for me. And it was just an experiment I was doing in an isolated area. I accidentally attached it to my live email for about 30 minutes. And in that 30 minutes, it responded to 80 emails. One of the emails it responded to was a vendor trying to sell me something, an AI tool, actually, ironically. And it got into a conversation with him and asked him questions about the tool. It was very good. It asked him really good, poignant questions about what's their business associate agreement, which is important for healthcare. Bunch of other things it asked them. Went back and forth, had 3 conversations back and forth with them. Ended up scheduling a meeting for me to see a demo. So, so it was fascinating to watch, but I never wanted it to be live yet. It's not
Yeah.
nearly ready. So that was kind of fun. So the tools are getting very, very powerful. You can do a lot. And by the way, I will stress everything I just said, I did without any programming whatsoever. So that was all just drag and drop. If I went to the next step and created systems and software around it, we could have been a lot more interesting. But we're not there yet. I'm not there yet. I'm too busy.
And then once you plug Evil Scott into the loop, it's going to be a whole new world for you, huh?
Well, yeah, so I have another one, right. I have another one that can generate content and then it can put that content into generate full me, Evil Scott, or whoever I want actually, videos that can pop right onto YouTube and it's just talking. And those are actually even higher quality than what we did on the quick Zoom thing because those are actually generated videos. They're not on the fly. So that much better syncing, much more natural sounding. And some of the new voice cloning is so good. I can't tell my own voice. Listening to it is eerie. So I was going to bring one up to show you, but I forgot to. So, but it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It's wild. We just got another chat. Met with Simply Talk today, and their pulse demo for voice chat was impressive. This is all great. Much appreciated. Thank you for the comment. Last comment, Matthew, yes, Scott was a fake in the beginning there. But
Thanks.
this Scott is not, and I appreciate your insight as well as yours, Paul. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Scott.
Thanks, John.
If anyone has any questions or needs any help, protecting themselves from these kind of AI generated deep fakes, you can get in touch with Amplix. Sales@amplix.com will help you out. If you're an existing client, reach out to your account managers. we would be happy to put you in touch with Paul or Scott, or any of the other providers in our network that would help you out. So thanks everyone for your time. Appreciate it, and have a good day. Bye.
Take care.
Thank you, everyone.